Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Best Practices webinar. We are still navigating uncharted territories. I think we're seeing some normalcies returning from the pandemic, but I know that there's still a lot of challenges that we're all still facing, and we're looking forward to just a great panel discussion today. We have a amazing group of panelists here. I'm just going to introduce them now. As I say your name, you guys just pop on screen. We'll hop right to it. Jason Hibbard, he's with Chenango Forks Central School District in Binghamton. Welcome, Jason. This is he's our newbie, first time on. So thanks so much for joining us. Greg Jackson is with Jeffco, Jefferson County Public Schools in Colorado. Al Karam, he is with Shenendehowa Central Schools in Clifton Park, New York. We have Clara, you know, I should have clarified how to say your name. How do you say your name, Clara? I'm sorry, you're muted. I can't hear you. Bisallion, is that right?
That's right.
I'm a Dorico, so believe me, I get Derico, Doricio, I get all kinds of things. So thank you so much, Clara, for joining us. And then finally, Julee Arnall, and from Bakersfield City School District in California. So thank you all so much for joining us. We have a really a wide open topic. We're talking about back to school. We're talking about how it looked and also what 2022, 2023 looks like. We talked about a lot of things. We did a dry run for all you folks who are joining us. And a lot of things, there's some issues such as ridership and discipline, parent behavior, a lot of different topics that we're going to cover today. But we want to make it clear, and we say it all the time. Number one, these are all being recorded. And so that's a resource for you. If there's things that you see, you want to revisit, you want to share with your team, we hope you do. Usually it goes on our YouTube channel within a day, and we make sure that we blast it out to everybody so you know it's available. And the other thing is that you, as the attendees, are very much a part of these webinars. Jason was just telling me earlier that he's been on a bunch of these as an attendee. And so he knows the format. This is very conversational. And by the way, if you make comments, I get a chance to bring these before the panelists. So if you have a question, if you want to have it specifically directed to somebody, I can do that. If it's something that's more open-ended, I'll be sure to open it up to the whole group. And then we also are always looking for panelists like Jason, who, you know, after watching a couple of them, I was able to talk them into joining us. So anyway, so thank you so much. So what I'm going to do to start off is I'd like to just have you all. So I'm going to start with Jason, go to Jason, just the way it looks on my screen. It's Jason, Greg, Al, Clara, and then Julee. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, maybe a little bit about how long you've been there, and then just kind of give us a little bit of a sense of the school district that you work for. Maybe it's number of students transported or number of buses or whatever it is that you guys kind of use as a number. Oh, before I forget, I'm wearing orange today because I'm a Mets fan. I'm sorry, I don't get many chances to do this. So hang on, Greg, you're from New York, right? Are you Yankee or Mets?
Yeah.
You're Yankee.
Yankee fan.
I was gonna wear this, but it may not be. Oh, he's turning his head from me. Oh my goodness, he can't even look at this. Okay, all right. So I'm definitely all about the Mets, but I'm also about Team Transfinder. This is the only caps we ever had made, I think. This is when we opened our Austin office, but I'm not gonna wear any baseball caps. But anyway. So if we'll go down, I had to get that off my, you know, they had a walk-off yesterday and the Braves lost, so the Mets got back to sole ownership in first place. So anyway, it's all about the team. So Jason, we'll start with you, a little bit about yourself, your district, and then we'll move on down the line.
Yeah, Chenango Forks, I'm about barely even a year into this position. Actually about 3 weeks shy of being a year in the position. I'm the coordinator of transportation here. We transport roughly 1,400 students. It's a smaller, you know, rural style district. I think we're right around 31 buses right now.
Very good. Excellent. Thanks so much. Greg.
Jefferson County Public Schools. We're the western suburb of the Denver metro area, and we cover almost 777 square miles, which is also parts mountains. We transport roughly, we have 32,000 eligible students. We transport only 14,000 of those students right now. We are running daily right about 308 buses, routes, that is. Right now, we're running on a daily basis. We have a fleet of almost 450. So very small area, compared to some areas across the country. We're small compared to some places. Like
Great.
Texas is what I'm thinking about, a lot of those locations.
Yes. Yeah, so Al is from Shenendehowa, and I'll let him talk about it, but that's like the biggest school district in the capital region. And by the way, I went to Guilderland and Voorheesville, but Guilderland, and you guys were always seen as kind of like Darth Vader, evil empire kind of. But by Texas standards, Shenendehowa is kind of a quaint school district. But it's huge, it's massive. So Al, tell us a little bit about your district.
Sure. Shen is 88 square miles, so compared to Greg's, very, very small. We have about a little bit over 10,000 students, a fleet of about 217 buses, a staff of about 270. We serve close to about 40 schools in district and out of district.
Very good. Clara.
So I always chuckle when I think of Al's area because we're practically neighbors, and we're nowhere near your size. So, we're a rural district too, and we have about 2,400 students, of which 1,500 are what I transport. So I'm going to continue to laugh compared to Greg and Al. So we have 45 vehicles in our fleet, but I only have 30 drivers.
Okay.
We get it done.
Interesting. During our dry run yesterday, we talked about parents who were driving their kids to school during when school was reopening, and Al's school was having traffic backing down one of the routes here, 146, which Clara said was actually causing delays in her school district, jokingly, I think. But
Right, yeah.
That would be a very long. And Julie, on the other side of the world, or at least on the other side of the country, thanks for joining us this early.
It's 8:30 in the morning here. My bus routes are still running. My name's Julee Arnall. I'm the assistant director. I'm starting my 9th year here at Bakersfield City Schools. So it's Bakersfield, which is in the central section of California, where you get your oil and where you get all your pistachios. Bakersfield City Schools we topped out at about 35,000 children. We're sitting at about 30,000 right now. We topped out busing 1,300 special needs and about 8,000 regular ed. We're not quite back to there, but right now we're running 93 bus routes. We're adding a route every about 2 weeks. So we're going crazy trying to find people to drive those buses. So far, so good. We made hard choices a few years ago, so we're in a pretty good position compared to our neighboring districts.
Well, I know I probably won't remember, so why don't you just tell me a little bit about the hard choices you made that have had some positive benefits?
About 4 years ago, we went to our assistant superintendent of business, who is my boss, and asked for, we call them flex bus routes. They're permanent substitute spots. So our drivers bid for their routes. They get 7.25 hours to drive this route, and it's whatever we need them to do on any given day. So about 10% of my staff are assigned to those positions. It saves us. We still have days where we have, like, our lead drivers will have to drive a bus route, but it's not every day, and our supervisors haven't driven in 5 years, and very much knock on wood there. When COVID happened and we knew we were short, we did a massive advertising campaign here in Bakersfield, and we trained 28 people last year, 27 people last year, which made a huge, huge difference. And we extended our walking boundaries, so our children walk a little further.
And we talked about how that's a very popular thing with parents.
They love me.
In fact, you have to live in a neighboring district so that you can go grocery shopping.
Right, I don't live in this district. They might hurt me.
I'm not driving. I mean, and Clara, you mentioned yesterday how you are driving. I don't know if you drive, Al. I'm assuming you probably don't. Jason, do you have to drive periodically?
Quite often lately. It's been a little rough.
So we're going to touch on that as well. But as you're talking, Julie, I'm thinking offline, maybe if you could send me, if you don't mind, that flex job description. Maybe that's something worth sharing with those that are watching. They may like that. That might be a concept worth investigating. So if you have something.
I'll put something together for you. It's made a huge difference to us to have people with a contracted job with great hours for a bus driver. 7.25 is a nice schedule. And they're building their retirement, eligible for benefits, and they're affordable.
Very good. All right, and then I'll ask kind of a generic, like an open question here, and then we'll kind of get into some of the meat and potatoes. But I'll go back to Jason again with Greg and Al and Clara, and closing up again with you, Julie. Just about how was school opening? Some things that maybe you saw, I don't know, how things maybe that were different this year than past years, or just your overall perception of how things went starting this school year. And so I'll just start with you, Jason.
No, it's been very rough for us. We made a few decisions on bringing back a few routes post-COVID this year. I have a whole nother level that I have to deal with because I'm the only school employee here. Everybody else is all contractors. So on top of, they're my responsibility, everything's my responsibility, but none of them work for me, is a whole nother level. We brought back a couple routes, again, because the ridership's up post-COVID, and we weren't able to provide the drivers. So every day's been a scramble. I'm probably driving 3 to 5 days a week. I typically try to just pick one of our out-of-district special needs runs, as that's time-wise the quickest and easiest. Had to collapse routes already. All of that, just try to save drivers.
Yeah, I think that probably what you're sharing is probably resonates with a lot of people, probably even some people on our panel. So so we're going to get to, you had something that I think might be, you give me an idea for a future webinar maybe on that relationship with contractors, subcontractors. So how about you, Greg?
It was very similar to Jason, but kind of last year we did our first time ever suspending routes to kind of make a relief for our folks and our staff. Staff was driving every day. We were falling behind in the years prior to this, and then last year we hit a wall because of some supports that we didn't receive that we needed, and so we had to punt to go back and focus on providing services to our students with disabilities, and started to reduce the routes that were gen ed focused, which was the higher ridership, but we had to focus on the students with disabilities. So last year we had to do a suspension of 29 routes. This summer and over the second semester of last year, we did a hard consolidation of a lot of our routes and started packing buses, which like Julie, I don't live in my district either. And so I've made a whole lot of great friends, and as I call those friends, my enemies, because we have more kids packed to a bus, they got to walk further to a stop. And we kind of call these flow stops is what we did, just flowing through the communities at their parks. So starting picking up parks that's not directly on a corner or a couple of blocks from a corner. And so we reduced our suspended routes down to 8, which is, for us, that was a success. But we still got the pain of still going through some things of trying to retain drivers right now. We're currently we are short 52 drivers currently, but that 52 is something where it's the ebb and flow of hiring and then trying to retaining right now. So, but I'm optimistic we're moving in the right direction, and all we can do is pray that we will move in that direction and continue to cover.
Very good. One thing that we always talk about when it comes to you folks is your adaptability, your ability to pivot when you need to. If you're one of those people that likes every day to be the same, your job would probably not be a good one. Al, how about you? How was your opening?
So for us, I think the opening was smooth from our perspective. The traffic on campus died down, so more kids are back on the buses instead of families bringing them in. Obviously, just like everyone else, we are impacted with the driver shortage. There's a couple of things that Shen did when the shutdown happened and before reopening. We decided we're going to maintain all the routes that we had. We're not going to consolidate. We're not going to do this, that, and the other, based on half of the kids coming in and the other half not coming in, switching every other day. So we kept all the routes because I did not want to consolidate, lose drivers, not get them back. Kind of had that forethought, you know what, we're going to lose drivers anyway because some of them were scared of the virus. I was not going to compound that. And as we worked through the pandemic, we made a conscious decision for the following year, and which was last year and this year, to actually build in time into the existing blocks that we have, the morning, afternoon blocks, so that we could feed those that we didn't have drivers for. And that has really worked out well for us. You know, knock on wood, we don't have to tell the superintendent, you know, we can't run X number of routes because we're short, because we were able to build that capacity. Matter of fact, I'll give you a quick example. Last year, on one day, we hit 45 driver positions that needed to be filled. I don't have that many subs. Matter of fact, I got 0 subs, right? But because we had built that capacity within the routes, we were able to cover that work. And, you know, some of those routes, I'll grant you, did run anywhere from, you know, 20 minutes to maybe 40 minutes late. But the mission is get the kids into school and get them home, right? And do it safely.
You're able to absorb 45 drivers.
Yeah, 45. Wow. So as part of our COVID plan, we also, I had my dispatch team produce and that's why I don't drive, by the way. Not that I can't. I'm solution oriented. I want solutions. It's easier to pick up the phone and say, hey, supervisor, I need you to drive because I'm out of drivers. Takes a little bit of work, though, to put a plan together, right? And so we had a plan. What will we do if we had 20 drivers out? And then we did it by 5 increments, all the way up to 50. You know, 50, I got to call the superintendent and say we're shutting down, right? So that plan really worked. And my dispatchers, great team. That's what they focus on every day before they go out and, you know, come and grab the supervisor to go drive. They better have had looked at everything to make sure that, you know, there are no other solutions, you know, except for me to go out and drive on that last run. So
you talk about that 50 mark, and it's like you're at 45. It sounds like floodwaters coming up, you know, and like, okay, I'm at my nose level, so I'm you know, almost getting ready to get overtaken. So that's a great idea, though, to have.
We keep the superintendent informed every step. So as soon as we hit like 30, 25, 30, I'll text them and say, hey, this is where we are, this is where we are.
Tripwires.
Yeah.
Very good. I like that. That's another idea. If you have something already in writing, I don't want to create more work like Julie. I don't want to create homework for you. But these are things that I'd like to revisit. We like to share these with people because, again, we are, like you, Al, all of you, really solutions oriented. And so how can we share? That's why we call this best practices. So Clara, how about you?
So you know, I always want to try to look at the positive side because we do work in chaos all the time. And I don't think we would do what we did do if we didn't enjoy chaos. But, you know, we had a great start. You know, we had some of our neighboring districts that had to cancel runs, you know, the first, you know, few weeks, and I made it until today before I had to cancel a run. So I want to say we were successful. You know, we have, you know, from our conversation yesterday, I went back to see the difference. We were talking about pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. So I'm transporting about 260 less kids this year than I did the 1920 school year, but I'm doing that even with 260 kids less. I'm doing that with 10 less drivers. So all of my vehicles are packed. You know, kids are, you know, not happy about having to share a seat again, things that they haven't had to do in ages. But so even with canceling a run, I want to say, you know, we have successfully started the year and we'll continue that way. And, you know, and to kind of bring everybody else into the conversation we had yesterday about interactions with parents. I called last night myself, parents of 43 students, and of those 43 individuals, I only had one that was not understanding, that wasn't saying, you know what, I appreciate what you guys do on a daily basis. So I'm going to call that a win based on what we have been able to do.
You called all the families of that bus run that you had to cancel.
Yes, and I was lucky because it was a small bus run, and it was a middle school,
lot
high
of
school,
calls.
elementary. So I did it because, I mean, I have a blast. I sent out the blast stop finder, but you know, the social media is a big thing. And when you send out a blast and it creates, you know, somebody posted on social media, and then there's that frantic telephone calls that you get in the morning. So when I was thinking about it last night, I'm gonna go ahead and spend the extra time it's going to take after sending that stop finder blast out and speak to these families, because I want to maintain that relationship I've built with the community, that I care. I've done everything I can. There's, you know, I don't have any more room on my buses, so I can't send another vehicle even later. So I want to let them know that I, you know, I've done everything I can. And it's unfortunate, but this is the situation.
You know, I absolutely, I mean, 40, I can't imagine how long, I mean, I'm sure you guys got some voicemail, but I'm sure it still took you a good couple hours or more to do that.
It took me a hot minute.
Well, I'll tell you what I love about it is that sometimes it's turning a negative into a positive, because it gave you an excuse, maybe not the most positive reason, but to reach out to families. And when you hear someone's voice, I always feel like people are easier to get angry at a you know, like you said, a blast or an email, but then when they actually hear your voice, all of a sudden there may be some empathy. All of a sudden they hear, like, you know, and so what a great way to create a touch point, even if it isn't always necessarily for a positive thing. So I think I would call that a huge win if you only heard one negative out of the 43.
Absolutely, yes. I had one person hang up on me, and I was okay with that. And we can appreciate their strong feelings. You know, I feel bad because they were in a bind. But the opposite side of that is I was calling you at 8 o'clock at night because I figured at 8 o'clock at night, that oh crap moment is better than, you know, 5 o'clock in the morning or 6:30. It's easier to make those adjustments.
I am really impressed. So I got to tell you, I think that you turned a negative into a great opportunity. So
let's hope my community still likes me later.
So, and Julie, how about you? How was your opening? And you opened when? You opened a lot earlier than I think some of us, at least.
We are finishing our 6th week.
Wow. Okay.
So we started mid-August when it was 115 degrees. It was just truly a blessing to run big buses with no AC for a week when it was over 110.
If anybody doesn't know, Julie has just a little bit of a sarcastic streak in her, which I love. So, so how did it go 6 weeks ago, if you can remember that far?
We also had a really good start. We changed our bell schedules, so we were practicing and running through and troubleshooting for all summer. So our first week was a blessedly calm week, and we have just continued to manage our fleet. I think we're down 22 people today, so that's, you know, 20%. So it's interesting. I'm just where all the others are. We've combined routes. We haven't had to cancel since we made our big cuts, but last year we combined a number of times. So at 5:30 in the morning, we were sending out, we call it Parent Square. It's our blast to all the families. We'd have to notify the media because our media will find out, and it's much better if it comes from us than if it comes from Facebook. And you apologize, and you're friendly, and you apologize again, and you just make it work.
Well, that's one of the things that we actually talk about in our parent app, which is Stop Finder, which was referenced earlier, that it's a way to get ahead of it. Because I think when there's that black hole of no information or whatever, that's where people go to Facebook, they call the local TV station. TV stations are very quick to go to a single parent's home, not a single parent, like a parent's home, even though they may only represent like a tiny fraction of what's going wrong, and it gets kind of magnified. Whereas if you can kind of control that, and let them also feel like they're being heard. I think a lot of it is also why I like Clara's conversation is because she's making these calls. It wasn't even just like a robocall, but that they can actually voice back to you. They're unlikely to, I think they're less likely to go on Facebook when they've talked to you and been able to tell you personally why it may be putting them in a hardship, but they understand your situation or whatever.
Yep.
Talking about parents, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it was great. And I'll even say I was able to talk to a couple parents about some other issues that they just hadn't had time to reach out for. So that was a bonus too.
Maybe next time you could also add a little line there about recruitment. Hey, by the way, have you ever thought about driving a school bus? Because if you could drive a bus, you might even be able to help be part of the solution. That might be too much.
How many times I say that a day?
So this is kind of segueing in a little bit. I want to get into ridership too. Clara did touch on that, and it might go into that area as well. But I want to talk about something that Greg brought up yesterday, and I think you all kind of related to it, was a shift in parent expectations. We had talked during some of our webinars over the last couple of years that during the pandemic, I mean, during the height of the pandemic, that there's a lot more forgiveness, a lot more understanding, that we're all trying to get through this tough time together. But it sounds like we've kind of moved out of that area and that there's some expectations that you've never faced before or maybe at a greater level. So Greg, can you tell me a little bit, and then everybody else feel free to jump in as you see fit, but tell me a little bit about what you're seeing on the expectation side.
Something I talked about earlier, it seemed like since the pandemic and we returned back to full operations, it turned into, as we shared yesterday, we called it Uber, yellow Uber, which is our yellow school bus. And I'm going to patent that, by the way, Rick, is Uber, and it's parents before, we would have bus stops that were 2-3 blocks away from the house, which that was close, right, or even closer they wanted. But now we started doing these flow stops, as I mentioned earlier, and that's too far. But it's just, they're still their community, they're still their subdivision, and we are now bringing you to a central location, so we're not making multiple stops within that community, which is only causing us to add more time to a stop, to a route. So we're trying to reduce that time and then pick up more and keep going. And so we've kind of seen this elevated, that doesn't work for me. And, they're taking these things up to, the board and saying to the Board of Education, this doesn't work. This is too far for my kid to walk. And so I'm an individual where I'm going to be very detailed to what the details are. So when I go to a board member, I'm like, so this kid now is walking less, half a block further for a bus stop. And then you get down to the actual brass tacks when you speak to the parent, it's about, I can't see my kid anymore. And it's this whole thing of, I'm trying to protect my kid from everything I can right now. And it's like, this is your neighborhood where you have decided to move to. You got to trust that, one, the adults that are transporting and also the kids that you're in that community with are going to be a part of that community and get those students to that bus stop, or you walk them to the bus stop, right? And see your community and see what's going on. But it's this, we want you to come right to my front doorstep and pick you up. And I'm like, well, I made this comment to a parent where I have a bus of 72 students on a bus. And I said, well, if I did that for every location, we would get to school and then have to take you all back home by the time we do so. So if that's what the kind of service you're looking for, that's not going to work, because my goal was always to get your students there before the bell time so they have a full day of instruction. But unfortunately, that specialized, we can't do specialized services.
Yes. Clara, you also mentioned, I think you called it weird things that parents and administrators want to approve.
Yeah, it's weird, unacceptable, unreasonable. It's just, and one of the ones that this scenario that sticks in my mind is I have a group stop and it's 0.2 of a mile from the child's door. And mom was telling me it takes that child 10 minutes to walk to his bus stop. So I said I would go take a look. So I drove out there and I walked the distance probably 10 times in that time frame that she's saying. And I was, going at a leisurely pace, with my coffee, just walking back and forth. So yeah, it's unreasonable to say that 0.2 of a mile is excessive. In like what you said, you moved into that community. You clearly found that residential area, or the area that it was safe enough for you to purchase a home in. You have to trust your community. And if you don't, why is that? Have you not gotten out there and become a part of your community? You know, have you taken the moment to meet your neighbors, to have your kids meet those other kids in your area that you can feel comfortable walking to school with? You know, and I hate to say it, back in the day, I walked to school, and I went to a school out of my district. So it took me 20 minutes to walk to school, and I did that with so it's one of those things. No, you're not going to get door-to-door service because you don't want your child to walk 0.2 of a mile. However, here are like a million other ways that you can make it a lot better in your mind.
Yes, yes. So how do you, go ahead, Julie, you look like you want to say something.
I tell parents, I speak to parents all the time about walking and school bus behavior, and I routinely tell them my job is to take care of 10,000 children. That their child is one of that 10,000 and they mean the world to me, but I have to get all 10,000 to school on time every day. I can't stop at their house.
Right.
It's, you have to apologize and explain, and some do and some don't.
And you, and Clara, I think you also mentioned, you know, the administration wants to approve aids, you know, there's, you know, on every single bus. And,
Right.
and so you have to be the bad guy.
I am the bad guy just because there's not enough staff to do that. I mean, I would absolutely love, for my driver's sanity, I would love to have an aide on every bus. The additional stress that the drivers have on a daily basis of watching what's behind them, in front of them, and a million other things going, you know, going on, I would love to do that for my drivers. So it's for them to say, oh, because Susie and Sally or Billy and John can't get along, I want an additional person on here. Whereas I think truly the focus should be on what's acceptable behavior, what's expected of us. And that's the conversation I have with parents on our, you know, kindergarten orientation. You guys expect, you know, transportation from us safely to and from school. So I have expectations of you and your children as well. So I think that the focus should be on those expectations. You know, how we ride the bus safely and appropriately and properly, instead of saying, oh, let's put an adult in here to you know, referee. No.
Jason or Al, any of you have anything you want to add to this? And then we'll jump into something I want to talk a little bit about regarding referrals. So we'll get to there in a second. But any other thoughts in terms of managing parent expectations, and how do you turn that into, you know, delivering maybe bad news, but also maybe getting them to understand where you're at?
Well, that's what I struggle with every day, because I deal with the exact opposite. Is the expectation here that I fell into is door to door for everything. And not only do I have to struggle with 72 stops, matter of fact, we do a split dismissal, high school, middle school, and then an hour later they go back out and pick up the elementary just to manage our runs. I have one route with 120 stops on it. By the time you do the high school, middle school, and then you go back out and do the elementary. And it's very difficult to manage that, plus being a rural district where I have parents that, you know, expect, personally myself, I missed a meeting yesterday because I was transporting a student because mom struggles to get the kid up to the end of the road, and the road is so small I can't take a big bus down it. So I use my Suburban and I transport. We're just out of options at that point. And it's the mentality in the community that we can't make any changes. You know, this is the way it is. On top of, you know, in New York State, Chenango Forks is nothing but sports. So now I have to manage sports runs. I have teams that want to leave at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We're utilizing occasional drivers to, you know, the coach can take the golfers because there's only 6 golfers riding the bus. We utilize a coach for that. And, you know, same thing, just trying to get that thought to parents, and, you know, it's difficult.
It is. Al, anything you want to add? Okay, so we have a commercial here, so there's a little mini commercial break here. Bridget, if you could advance the slide, thank you so much. I don't know if you've all heard about this, but I hope you have. I don't know, definitely the panelists, you all need to, if you haven't already, enrolled in the Top Transportation Teams Awards program. Really looking for, it's a brand new program. It's just across the country. It's not just Transfinder clients, it's any transportation team across the country and in North America, so including Canada, as well as bus contractors. We would love to just find out what the best of the best are doing and how. It's why we do these webinars, frankly, is to pick your brain and hear what works for you and how you overcome certain challenges. And so we know that there are a lot of transportation departments that have been very creative. They've very resourceful, persevering during very challenging times. We got the driver shortage, we got the pandemic, we just talked about expectations. We're going to be talking about student behavior and parent behavior or misbehavior, picking your word. So if you get your smartphone out, you can do the QR code right there, or just type in your URL, toptransportationteams.com. Does not take that long to enroll, and then survey questions will go to your team. And the other thing that's neat about it is it also gives you talking points with your team, because I know most of you, or all of you, are probably very much engaged in your team and you're building team camaraderie. It also gives you, hey, if you get the results back and you see maybe there's an area that we got all 4s instead of all 5s, you know, how can we move those 4s to 5s? I can tell you Transfinder has been involved in some, it's called best places to work and others. And on those odd years that we didn't get it, Tony takes it, my boss, Tony Civitella, CEO, takes it extremely seriously to see where our weak areas may be that we can improve upon. And so that continues to make you an even better team. So that's enough of my commercial. I'm going to bring that back. I'm just going to warn everybody that slide comes back one more time just as a reminder. I want to now turn it over to Al. Al, we talked a little bit yesterday about referrals. Now go back one, the first one, back one. There we go. I'm going to have you, Al, talk to these 2 slides that you gave me. And then if anybody wants to piggyback on what Al's talking about, but Al, just walk me through what we're looking at here.
So the graph you're looking at is data on referrals submitted. These are actual referrals that driver comes into our transportation secretary, fills out, and we submit it into to the schools so they can do what they got to do with it. And the data starts from the first year that I started here at Shen in 14-15. And based on that data, you can see the numbers going down. One of the things that I first saw when I got here was that there was a really not good working relationship between our driver cohort and the school administrators. And I had to fix that. And part of the problem is they do write-ups, the drivers do write-ups, but the circle was never completed. They never got, you know, they did in some cases, but not all cases did they get that resolution back. So we started working on that. Then we implemented a process within the department that we wanted our drivers to follow, from talking with the student to assigning a seat in the front for X number of days. And typically I don't allow more than 5 because I want the drivers to use a carrot and stick with the student to try to change that behavior. And if the behavior continues, then we're going to move to a referral. Now, that doesn't say, that doesn't mean that if a student does something egregious and unsafe, that we don't go straight to a referral. We do. But you know, the standard push, shove, you know, pinch me, whatever. I want a progression. So when we get the referral to the school administrator, they know that we've gone through this process already. They don't have to come back and tell us, well, can you put them in the front seat for a week? We've gone through that. I need you, Mr. and Mrs. School Principal, now to try to do something with this kid, get with the parent, do whatever you got to do. And you can see how the numbers start going down, which, you know, I need to know if our system is working or not. And the only way really to tell that is by reducing everything to data, right? And let the data talk to you. And then, of course, COVID hit 1920. That's why those numbers are low. But I also think the numbers are low because we had less students on the buses, right? Because we were doing the AB day kind of a thing. Kids were more compliant. They didn't want to touch each other. They were scared of COVID, whatever. And then 21-22 ended up with about 439. This year will be the first year really outside of COVID on the tail end of it to see if our system is still working or if we need to tweak it.
That's great. Anybody have any thoughts on this? And what kind of things do you also do to deal with student behavior? It's so critical. We actually can, shameless plug, I guess, on within our Route Finder Plus solution is Form Finder, which is another. We have other ways to do this as well to help close that loop. If Johnny's having a bad week on the bus, could be something else going on there, right? That if it's out of the ordinary. And then how does that get to the school so that the teacher is aware that, hey, he's had a rough week here, in case you were not aware, and just kind of making everybody's working together for everybody's good, really. The student's good, but also the class is good and the bus is good. Anybody have any thoughts on, we got one more slide from you, Al, I want to get into, but anybody have any thoughts or anything that works for you?
Al, I'm just curious, do you have that broken up to elementary and middle school, high school? By any chance?
Yes.
Do you see that a lot of so for us, I know a lot of our behavior issues come from our elementary students. It's easier to reason with the older kids. Do you find that's the same trend with your district?
I would say elementary, middle school kind of like run neck and neck.
Good questions. Anybody else?
I've been kind of doing something similar, and I prefer to like Al says, let the drivers handle it at their level before we actually do a referral. I've actually been using Transfinder, though, another step. I don't do a form. I use our own local form, but then I scan it to the student's record. So anybody can go to Viewfinder and see what's going on right there. It's saved me piles of paperwork and
I'm just so glad this stuff didn't exist when I rode the bus, because I was that pain in the neck on the bus. I won't refer to my hour and a half on the bus each way, because I know you guys, already know that. But okay, Al, we'll go to the next slide. Not that one. Sorry. Go ahead, take this one away.
So driver recruitment, right? Again, I'd like to reduce everything down to numbers. I didn't have data for 14, 15. I was learning, about Shen, and focus was on other places. Then around March of 15, 16, that March, I started keeping data on how many interviews we were doing, how many we were bringing in, how many actually got their CDL, and how many did not finish. And so you can see, for example, the blue is how many we interviewed, the green is how many we accepted, the red is inactive, and the yellow is retained, and then the smaller number, it's percentage retained versus the percentage interviewed.
What is inactive? What does inactive mean?
Inactive mean they started, we accepted them to the program, and either they never showed back up for training, or somewhere through the training process they decided this isn't for them.
Okay.
And, I use this data when I'm talking with the press, for example, or when I'm talking with the board. It really is a Herculean effort to find, right? You got to find people from a small group that actually fit the bill just to pass your initial interview. You really, if you look at the numbers, it comes out to like about 2.5 bodies you need to retain one driver. That's a lot of recruitment. The military has a hell of a time doing, recruitment on their end. And from my experience in the military, I know like each recruiter's got to find between a body and a half to 2.5 bodies just to get, one, Marine. I'm talking on the Marine Corps side. But at any rate, these numbers clearly show, the effort that it takes. And, it has to be an ongoing process. You can't sit on your laurels, and you certainly can't wait on people to come knocking on your door. Part of the problem, I think, for us, and the numbers show it, is the foot traffic died. It just died during COVID. You still had people leaving for a lot of reasons. They're aging out. They're physically they can't do the job. There's something medically wrong with them. Family issues. So that kept going, but no one was coming in to backfill. and that issue is still there. So I even share this kind of data when I'm talking with our state representatives, be it the assembly people, or I've had 3 senators here. I had a couple of the assembly folks here to share with them this information because we need their help to do different things, you know, to help retain what we have. For example, one of the things that came through our efforts in talking with legislatures, I wasn't the only one doing this, by the way, so I'm not trying to take credit, but I can tell you personally, I handed a talking sheet to a couple of senators, and one idea was in the state of New York, if you're a state retiree, you couldn't earn more than $35,000 a year. Well, that keeps a lot of people out of the job market, right? So I believe they changed that, and I don't know if it's permanent, but I know they kicked it up to 50 grand. So all this stuff that we do is really important, and we just gotta use this data to push it out there, keep the spotlight on it, because we are in a pickle we were before COVID, and now it's doubly worse than what it was before. So that's how I use this data.
That's great. We talked a lot yesterday about the driver shortage. And I saw, Greg, you were shaking your head at a couple of points that Al was saying. So why don't I just go right to you first? What resonated there with you?
So the work Al's doing is similar to what we had to do here. I hired a recruitment company that was outside of the district because our district was in a state of, there's a lot of flux as new leadership came in. So as that happened, our HR department is kind of like the recruiting team they had was no more. So a lot of our efforts of trying to do some of the work that we were doing some, you know, boots on the ground, going to parks, going to markets and going to areas and advertising, getting tables and stuff like that. But we needed to take a different effort. And what we kind of seen very similar to what Elle was talking about was that, you know, it was, if you weren't making the efforts, you weren't going to get anybody coming through the door. So as I was looking through the schematics here in the data, it was just like, for example, we had worked with this company that specialized in doing social media work. And so they have every major social media. They have Jeffco as an advertisement structure. So they started to reach out and touch to folks who are looking through phones and looking through Facebook and looking through Twitter, looking through all these different pathways that most of the most original ways of recruiting, they didn't do that. They use, you know, Monster, they use, you know, Indeed and those type of formats, but they still use those. And what happened was we had over 2,100 individuals who went to that, as we say, we call sourced through that number of 2,100 folks. We then went to a situation where we had over 147 individuals who we either interviewed or they were no-shows for an interview. And if not a no-show, they went to the next level, right? So as we went to the next level, we were at about 87 folks that actually applied. And then from 87, it went down to 46 who we trained and retained over that period of time. So again, as we saw that, it was at ebb and flow, but we had to find a new way and a strategic way to actually get the word out there that we need drivers. Because in this area, we're competing with a whole lot of commercial-based companies that are private sector and this public sector, and they all raised their prices on food and everything else, not just with the inflation part, because they were also trying to tap into that resource of drivers. Because one of my really good neighbors, he's the general manager for the Kroger here, and he said, yeah, we increased our price, our what we pay our drivers, and also to appeal and steal your drivers, and don't mean to do that purposely, but we got to transport and feed you, right? So it was like, I get it, but it hurts at the same time. But we also kind of saw that we were losing that. We had to start to track how could we advertise just as effective as they did with a very limited budget. So I love the work you did here. It was outstanding work.
Thanks, Greg. You know, another key point, I think we all noticed, our HR department's focused on the educational side of the house, not necessarily on the support side. We have to be our own HR. We have to be our own recruiters, if you will, right? Do everything that we can. I built some really good relationships with the local TV personalities around here, the reporters, and they have really helped the past few years of keeping the bus driver shortage story out there in the public eye.
Oh, it's actually, yeah, I mean, it's actually mainstream now. You knew it was bad when it finally made it to like the network, news. We talked a little bit about this yesterday, even, with legalization of marijuana, or even just the influx of CBD, that can actually skew results. I think Elle and Greg, you both talked a little bit about that. That you may think that that CBD would not affect a drug test, but it has. I think you said, and that again is now impacting the pool as well. So you both want to talk a little bit, and anybody who wants to jump in on that, Jason as well.
First
That's
crack.
another little thing that we're going to be dealing with maybe in the future more.
I'll take a crack at it. I've had a couple of cases
No
like
pun
that.
intended. Sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I've had a couple of cases where CBD was used, and one of them was during the summer. So the individual thought, well, I'm not driving, I'm not working for you. During the summer, I didn't see anything wrong with it. They had to do a random the month that school opened, and they popped. And talking with our medical review officer, who had spoken with somebody at the federal level, they told her there is no such thing as THC-free CBD anything, additives, this, that, or the other. Even if they have it on their as a disclaimer, or not a disclaimer, but on their
Packaging.
yeah, whatever they put on the product,
The ingredients.
yeah, the ingredients, don't believe that. They don't have any industry standards for that. So that is one thing I am pushing hard with our folks, that don't go to your doctor, don't go to parties, and if you go to parties, you got to know what you're ingesting, because a lot of people now are serving that, especially in New York now. It's kind of legal, because you will pop positive, and we do have a zero tolerance policy, and you got to balance that against do you keep firing people left and right, or do you work with them, whatever. So the best thing is to get the word out and be really hard about it. It is still a Schedule I drug on the federal registrar, and that's it. Don't touch it.
Very good, Greg.
Yeah, Elle hit it. We had some folks that went to a end of the year party, and it was off site. We didn't entertain it, and they ingested something that they felt that was a cookie or a brownie or whatever it was, and not realizing that they had ingested this, substance. And one thing I say to folks all the time, I'm like, yes, Colorado has legalized this, but it's not federally recognized, right? So I said, that's great that Colorado, and we have a whole bunch of folks who love and voted this as, I think it's the highest thing that was ever passed in Colorado, was the passing of marijuana. We can't pass any taxes, but tax increases, but for schools, but we can. I think it was 87% favorable, which that was just very telling. But the part of this was that folks, I had to constantly tell people, be careful what you're ingesting, right? Because when you go to these parties, edibles are now the big thing, gummies and the whole nine. Someone says, this is only going to be in your system for a day, it's THC. Make sure you understand what it is that you're putting in your body. And that's, I just had a person who had something that was given to her because she was having some sleeping issues. And so she wanted to have something. So her friend said, take a half of this gummy or a quarter of this gummy, it'll help you sleep. Then a random came up, and in the random, she popped hot. And in that process of it, it's like, great driver. We had this driver for a good number of years, and unfortunately we had to let you go. But what we've done is, okay, we will let you go from that position just to try to keep you. Can you be a bus assistant for us, right? But a driving position, we can't keep you in a driving position for, I think we kind of have now this little nexus of roughly 2 years to kind of, and so we try to keep you employed with us. And then, and the success of that's been very on a 50-50. Most folks can't live off of what our assistants are making, so they will either move on, or some folks will say, well, I can do this, thank you for thinking about that. And it helped. And, but again, it's just tough right now, where you have individuals where even when you're doing your drug test, when they're coming on board, how many tests that we've had that came out positive. So it's scary stuff.
I thought it out there just as it was really just a touch on a topic that I think we're probably going to be revisiting. So, but it did come up yesterday. I was like, wow, I didn't even think of that. So thank you for bringing that up. Okay, we're close to the end here. I want to have my little shameless commercial one more time. Really, it's not about Transfinder. It's all about, I didn't know which one was next. Okay, so this is the top transportation teams. Again, please, if you have not registered, enrolled in this amazing awards program. I mean, we really do want to see who the best of the best are and then learn from them. Please either pull up your smartphone and do the QR code, or go to toptransportationteams.com and give it to your administrator to do, because they're going to be the ones that are going to be administering the surveys. Okay, next slide. And while this slide comes up, we're going to do final takeaways. I'm going to start with you, Julie, since you were the last of the line. So I'll give you a warning while I'm giving my spiel on sharing your stories with us. And then I'm going to ask our CEO, Tony Civitello, to pop on as well. He does an awesome, I'm going to put some pressure on Tony, but he does such a neat job of either encapsulating what was covered or throwing out that last thing to make you think like, oh yeah, that's a good point. So no pressure there, Tony, but if you could pop on. So we're always looking for stories. Again, this is anybody in the industry, again, not strictly Transfinder clients, it's anybody, about what's worked for you. And I will tell you that we will contact you, and we may do a white paper on what worked for you, or we may ask you to be on a webinar with us and share your stories as well. So just go to mystory@transfinder.com and put in there, my story, and then we'll follow up with you. But this is how we build this amazing, these amazing best practices webinars. It's your stories. So I'm going to start with Jason, go down to Greg, Al, and then Clara. Julie will bring it up, and then Tony closes out. Jason, what's one takeaway that you would want anybody who's been on this webinar to take, either to bring back to their team or to maybe share with the administration or whatever? What would be one thing that you'd want them to take away with them?
The only thing I've come up with, just stay as flexible as you can for everything going on. Like we said earlier, it seems like every day is something different.
Very good. True enough. That has not changed. Greg.
Stay positive for your team. Be that light for them, because as they go through the day-to-day and they see between trying to do their duties, especially your staffs, and then also keep your folks motivated. Do what you can to make them feel valued, because in this time we're seeing they see a lot of negativity. And so if it's not coming from you as the cheerleader for them, then we're going to get it from. So just doing that is the best thing.
That's great. Plus, it helps with retention, and it probably also helps with recruiting, because word of mouth, they go, hey, you got to come work with Greg. You love working for a guy like this. So that's great. Al.
Same as Jason and Greg just said, and then I would say make sure you have a plan in place to deal with the adversities that you're going to face. The plan is a foundation, has got to be flexible.
Very good. If you don't, what's the expression? If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. I didn't make that up, but I'm surprised I can remember that. But okay, Clara.
Much like I always say, just appreciating your staff, letting them know on a daily basis that it is a tough job these days, much more so than it was in the past, that you appreciate them showing up. Of course, being out there. I mean, for me, in my district, it's smaller. So when my drivers come in, I go out, hey, how's it going? What's up? And I also allow them to complain, in my space. Come in here and tell me how horrible it was, so that you can leave that here and go out and, the next leg is not as bad because you were able to dump that. So appreciation, understanding, just open doorways. And of course, I said it's a smaller district, so I'm able to do that. And also, communicate with your community, be open, honest. That's how we're working over here.
Very good. That's great stuff. Julie.
I think the biggest mistake you can make is to try to do things the way we've done them in the past. Be flexible, agile, and open to any change at any time, and keep muscling through this. We're improving every day. It will be better tomorrow. It will be great in the future.
Awesome. I love that. I would work for any one of you. Of course, I work with somebody who is very much of the same. He bleeds yellow like you guys and is also very much an optimist, and better days are always ahead. Tony?
Well, great discussions. I always think there's, in order to solve this driver shortage problem really across the country, there's really two takeaways. One is the short term, and I think most of you have talked about short term, what do you need to do for short term? And obviously, one of the things our takeaway from this summer is that we're helping a lot of our clients to, consolidate routes and maybe go multiple tiers. Those are definitely short term. Long term, what can you do with drivers? That's really what we came up with this top transportation teams. It starts with that. Long term, it really talks about a culture. You guys are rock star. That's why you're on this webinar at this point. But think about it. In the private industry, we've had struggles to hire people for decades. We had to boast it's just we pay a lot of money because most people don't go to a job because of the pay. They want to be appreciated, and they want to know that they're working for a company that is best place, top transportation teams. That's really one of the biggest reasons why we did this. Really, it's not a contest. Yeah, there's going to be a winners, and I hope you don't look at it as losers. Look at it, that's an opportunity, because you got to think how private industry I've looked at it. Greg, I love that you're talking about you got recruiters, you got Indeed, and obviously I always love the stats that Al shows. Those are numbers that are not short term. I know you guys know it. Those are not, you don't make changes on a short term basis on that. So I always look at two things. What can you do right now, and what's long term plan? Because I hope you put 75% of your effort on the long term and 25% on short term. But great topic. Wow. The drug situation, that's a whole other topic right there. I didn't even think about that stuff. Wow.
I know, it shocked me. Okay. Last thing for housekeeping, stay tuned. Next month, October 20th, will be our next best practices webinar. Anybody who's on this wants to throw out some questions or some topics, or even want to volunteer to be on a webinar, I'd love to hear from you. Just again, go to mystory@transfinder.com and we'll follow up with you. I want to thank our panelists. You guys are amazing, really amazing. The people don't realize we only touched a sample of all the amazing stuff that we talked about yesterday. But we'll bring you guys all back too. But thanks again. I hope everybody has a great rest of their day. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.